This is your Barbados Today Morning News Update for Friday, May 3rd, 2019. I'm Carol Williams. Thanks for joining us. Barbadians shouldn't expect the minimum savings rate on deposits to be reinstated anytime soon. And the central bank also has no intention of setting bank fees and charges. The central bank had removed the minimum deposit rate that was set at 2.5% back in 2015. That resulted in some commercial banks having interest rates as low as 0.01%. Central Bank Governor Clevenson Haynes was asked about the issues yesterday following his review of Barbados' economic performance for the first quarter of the year.
We don't think that it would make sense for us to be in a position of trying to charge, trying to look at all of the fees that banks and say, well, this fee should not be greater than this fee should not be. It's not practical. If you were running a business, I don't think that that would be practical for you to try to have a price control on every commodity that you do. But there are a select number of commodities in the community which are subject to price controls. As it relates to interest rates are really driven by economic conditions. The challenge that we have right now is that there is so much liquidity in the system that if you ask a financial institution, they really don't need new funds. And that's why interest rates, in a sense, are as low as they are.
Speaking on another matter, this time Liat, the bank governor, says he too is worried about the uncertainty facing the regional carrier.
The Liat situation is obviously one that is concerning. And I know that regional governments are in the process of discussion, trying to find a resolution because, not having a regional airline impacts not only Barbados, it impacts all of the regional economies which depend on tourism. Our ability to be able to move from one country to another will be severely impacted in the absence of a regional airline. But such an airline clearly has to be one that is economically viable. Clearly, our own financial situation and the financial situation of several of the other governments is not one in which one can continually have to inject funds into Liat. And certainly Barbados has had to inject a substantial amount of funds over the years in order to keep it afloat.
As the situation in Venezuela continues to deteriorate, the leaders of Barbados and other regional countries are again mulling the next step. The issue is high on the agenda of a meeting of CARICOM heads in Trinidad, but the grouping is itself divided on the matter. Jamaica, St. Lucia, Haiti and the Bahamas have broken ranks with the Caribbean bloc, which has called for dialogue and diplomacy. Instead, they sided with the U.S., which is backing opposition leader Juan Guaido, who has declared himself Venezuela's leader. Prime Minister Mottley spoke on the issue ahead of her departure.
Security in a region that is now also affected by an unstable Venezuela means that there are different considerations for us to consider. Because even if there is no war, there is a migration crisis that places pressure with respect to prostitution, drugs, guns, and all other kinds of things that stand to affect the stability of the southern and eastern Caribbean.
And we'll return to the situation in Venezuela later in the update. An opposition official is suggesting that the writing is on the wall for two government ministers over the public transportation fiasco. The chairman of the Transport Board resigned earlier this week after public outcry over poor bus service and facilities at bus terminals in the wake of the 75% hike in bus fares. Now, opposition spokesman Sylvan Greenwich says there are indications that Prime Minister Mottley isn't happy with Minister of Transport Dr. William Duguid and his junior minister Peter Phillips.
I think the writing is pretty much clear, and the writing is on the wall. If you can just go back to the walkthrough, it is strange that two other ministers other than the ministers responsible for transport were the ones asked to go down to the terminal to get a feel for what is going on with respect to the impact of the increase in bus fares. I don't know if that's a showing that the confidence in the ministers are not there. I'm not certain, but I would leave the public to determine that. But I'm certain that you should see some movement with respect to the ministers very shortly.
Reinstate, okay. I just wish you to elaborate a bit more. I mean,
Well, I'm not the Prime Minister. I'm saying the Prime Minister will be the ones who will make that decision relative to what she thinks the value of the two ministers are. But from our perspective, they're proven to be ineffective.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
Returning now to the situation in Venezuela, where the leadership yesterday made a show of unity with top military chiefs as it pushed back against U.S.-backed attempts to oust President Nicolas Maduro. It came the same day as a court issued an arrest warrant for an opposition figure, as we hear in this report.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and key military figures on Thursday made a public show of unity after days of unrest. Maduro praised the army for its loyalty to the socialist government.
They were not afraid to say no to the traitors, no to the participants of an attempted coup. No one can be scared.
The televised display is meant to reject claims by the United States and the opposition that the Armed Forces High Command was prepared to turn on the president. Venezuela's capital, Caracas, was racked with chaos this week as anti-government protesters clashed with police. The violence sparked after opposition leader Juan Guaido claimed to have the military on his side and called on them to help overthrow Maduro. The United States supported the opposition protests and this week claimed Venezuela's defense minister and others had secretly agreed to remove the socialist president.
They committed to support ousting Maduro, and it's time for the rest of the military to show what their own families believe ought to happen, and that's Maduro needs to go. Yes, ma'am.
But after 2 days of street clashes, the protests appeared to fizzle.
And finally, the French government has accused radicals of storming a famed Paris hospital during the fiery May Day rally, an incident that risks raising tensions between authorities and a nationwide protest movement, as we hear in this report.
This mobile phone footage was taken from one of the patients' rooms. It captured the moment when riot police chased some May Day protesters onto the premises of the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital. Some of them headed to the post-surgery ward to try and go inside the building.
All of a sudden, we saw around 50 people coming our way, trying to push the door open. We rushed to help the nurses to stop these people from entering.
The break-in drew a sharp response from the government, with Prime Minister Edouard Philippe denouncing it as totally irresponsible and the Interior Minister describing it as an attack. The protesters argue that they were merely running away from police firing tear gas, as one demonstrator said during the incident.
It's like something out of a history book. Civilians are seeking refuge in a hospital to protect themselves from state repression.
Hospital staff mostly agree.
We didn't know how they would behave, but apart from that, we didn't feel threatened as such.
And that's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook. And sign up for breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM. I'm Carol Williams. Have a good day.